Hello and welcome to another episode of Beyond the Call. I'm Jeremy Hunt. I'm a veteran and chairman of the board of directors here at Veterans on Duty, and we are so excited. This episode, we're featuring Congressman Zach Nunn. And Congressman Nunn, he represents the 3rd District in Iowa, and he's on the House Select Committee on China, Financial Services. He's also a 20-year U.S. Air Force reservist as well, and he has over 700 flying hours. I mean, the man is just a boss, and I'm so excited to have time chatting with him today. You're going to love this episode. Let's dive in. Awesome. Thank you so much, Congressman, for being here.
Brother, thanks for coming in for this. This is exciting.
This is always exciting. And it's fun. You've been not only have you been a friend to Veterans on Duty for many years, but you also have been a personal friend of mine for many years. So your family just means so much.
Our spouses adore each other. That's always a good start.
Exactly.
So,
That's exactly right. Well, I wanted to start off. I mean, I want viewers at home to be able to hear your story about what inspired you to serve. You, of course, are a colonel in the U.S. Air Force Reserves, even still serving to this day, and have been serving for 2 decades now.
That's right.
So tell us a little bit about that and what inspired you to raise your right hand 2 decades ago.
You know, I think there is just an incredible group of individuals across America who have done the same, and so we're not more unique than anyone else. It is worth noting that it's 1% of America who stands up to defend people in this country by putting on the uniform, deploying where the nation calls them. We grew up kind of in a generation post 9/11. I remember being in school, watching the towers fall. The military had not even been really on my radar. This is something I wanted to do. And immediately after that, joined up to serve in the U.S. Air Force, and immediately went through commissioning and started flying operations in Afghanistan, later Iraq, and then back to Afghanistan. Like so many, I think, of that generation, multiple combat tours were the standard. Yeah. And it reflects, my family's tradition. My grandfather was a scout in World War II. He was at the Battle of the Bulge. As a young guy, went off to serve in a country he'd never probably even heard of. Ended up being shot and medevaced, being on the front line in first contact with the Germans. Wow. My other grandfather served in Korea. My dad served during the Vietnam era. So I think that there's not only a family legacy here, but I think it's imbued, particularly as a guy from Iowa, that there's a call to service. And whether that service is in uniform, whether it's to the community, whether it's to the country, we each have a responsibility to stand up and do our part. And that candidly is what I feel like so many of my colleagues here on both sides of the aisle are attempting to do, is serve our communities, whether it's in uniform or whether now it's serving in Congress.
Yeah. And you have over 700 flying hours? You've been Afghanistan, Iraq. How did those experiences shape what you do today? How did that kind of shape your view on American foreign policy and the importance of our national security?
I'll share one of our first combat sorties out. We were flying over Afghanistan, and we got a crackle call over the radio that U.S. Special Forces were under fire. We were the only aircraft in the region. We have long legs. That means we stayed up for about 18 hours providing direct combat support to this element. These guys were trapped in a valley, and there were 2,000 Afghan Taliban forces raining fire down on them. They were able to shelter overnight, but we vectored in as mission command the ability to bring in F-18s and northern-based F-15s in to do strikes. We brought in the big bombers, and we lit up the ridge line, but we also provided a canopy of safety for the Special Forces team. And that wasn't done just alone. It immediately became clear to us that I needed to have, the 32-year-old pilot who was helping drive the operation, us as a young 20-something lieutenant helping coordinate the actual fires, and then a 18-year-old kid who had just gotten out of boot camp who was listening to Farsi on the ground, who could see where the Taliban was coming in, speaking Urdu, speaking Arabic. But in this case, it was a Farsi element, so meaning Iran was operating in the area. And as a result, we ended up not only saving that team of Special Forces operations, we provided them an evac route so that they could get rescued. I'm proud to say, every American came home alive that night.
Amazing.
But with that, it also brought into sharp relief how important it is that we worked as a team there. Didn't matter our background, our religion, our political views, we were all focused on saving American lives. And I think by extension, that has been something that has echoed throughout my career of whether I'm serving on the aircraft, I joined the intelligence community later, serving in China and Russia, areas that we can really protect Americans and serve the national interest for folks, whether they're getting fired on at the front line or whether they're, community members back at home who just need help.
Yeah, yeah. And so talk a little bit about that. When you get back, you served your country for so many years. What made you want to come here? I mean, and to Washington to continue your work, your service to the country.
Yeah, no, I mean, so this was a great opportunity. I'd just come off active duty and had switched over working in the intelligence community for the three-letter agency. And, met an amazing woman who we decided to start a life together. And we thought, what better way than to go back to our hometown and serve in this new capacity? So I switched over to the Air National Guard of all things. I started commanding a unit there. But more importantly, I got the opportunity to be a good dad, spend time with my incredible wife, and then really serve at a local level. And that kind of matriculated into serving in the state legislature. And one day the call came and they said, hey, we want you to take what you've done well here in Iowa and take it to Washington. Tax cuts in Iowa made our economy grow. Taking care of families in Iowa, take it to Washington. Doing the kind of things that our state, I think, has done really well in, taking care of our community and leading by example is now something that we've brought to Washington. And candidly, we've been able to work in a bipartisan way because we've reached out to other military members who are also serving in Congress. And that's really where the mission continues. It means taking care of veterans, but also taking care of that greater sense of the American psyche.
Yeah. And, one thing that I've noticed, that you were really a leader in a lot of these national security issues. You haven't, especially having served and continuing serving, you've really been taking the lead. You've recently introduced legislation to return to maximum pressure on Iran, and really, which was the policy in President Trump's first term.
That's right.
Can you talk a little bit about that and the importance of that here?
I want to compliment President Trump and the security team here. They've really focused on what the threat coming from Iran is, and they've not taken it lightly. Over the course of the last 24 months, we have seen, sadly, multiple American soldiers die as a result of Iranian attacks on their locations throughout the Middle East. We have seen Hamas literally take Americans from Israel and hold them hostage with a former administration that candidly did nothing to stop them. We have seen Hezbollah take multiple strikes against allies throughout the region and forward push, including trying to get activists into the United States. And challengingly, we have a Houthi rebel group, all of these being funded by the number one sponsor of terrorism, Iran, Houthis taking potshots at U.S. carrier strike group with very little response.
Yeah.
So the Trump team came in its first 100 days, was immediately taking lethal strikes against the Houthis, was holding Hamas accountable and bringing Americans home, and was crushing the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps ability to have these proxy groups operate not just in the Middle East, but threaten Americans right here at home.
Yeah.
I feel, as somebody who's flown more combat sorties than I care to mention against Iran and against the operations in the Middle East, that these guys, one, only recognize that the United States is serious when we take clear action. And so I'm proud to be leading as the chairman of RSC's National Security Task Force, a maximum pressure campaign. We are bringing in legislators from across the spectrum who want to hold Iran accountable today so they don't become a nuclear threat tomorrow. Yeah. And I think in working with former CENTCOM commanders and other leaders in the area, we recognize right now Iran is at a tipping point where they realize with their illicit oil sales to our near-peer competitors like China, where they're getting $80 billion, that they are investing in a homegrown terrorist cell backed by nuclear force. The United States has the ability to turn the dial on this. One, to help the Iranian people have a better life, but more importantly than that, protect our homeland from the threat that the Ayatollahs in Tehran are perpetrating in places like Israel that we saw this year, where 300 weapon systems were leveraged against that country. And I'm happy to say that American airmen stood in the breach with our allies, the Brits, the French, the Israelis, the Jordanians, other Arab countries, a leadership coalition that only the United States could be effective in. Stop that. But when a nuclear calculus is entered into this, it becomes far more dangerous. And I don't want to see Iran or the Ayatollah leverage that against our allies, leverage that against the homeland, when we have the opportunity, and I would say the responsibility, to stop it now. And that's exactly what our legislation aims to do, is provide maximum pressure for Iran to either stop the bad behavior and come back into the international fold for the sake of not only the Iranian people, but peace throughout the region, or be held accountable for their actions that have resulted in the death of Americans time and time again. This stops now.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate your leadership on that. I mean, and really bringing together policymakers to see what can be done to make sure we can stop right now the Iranian regime. They're crippled. This is an opportunity to apply maximum pressure and make sure that the mullahs in Iran, that they think twice before continuing these attacks on our troops.
And my friend, I want to highlight that you hit the absolute right point here. Not only are we sending a message to bad leaders in Iran, we're sending a very clear indication because of what President Trump has already done to folks in Moscow, folks in Beijing, folks in Pyongyang and North Korea. They recognize here that the United States is not going to be in this rollover position anymore where we're going to speak a lot and do nothing. Peace through strength was effective for Reagan. It's something the Trump administration wants to see. And it's a role that we here in Congress, combat veteran or not, that we need to help push forward to help protect our country.
Absolutely. And Iran is not the only threat that you've been crafting policy around. Yeah. Also the threat of the Chinese Communist Party and the right of China. You serve on the House Select Committee on China. Yeah. And we know that, China, they are trying to control a lot of our agriculture systems. They're trying to control a lot of the agriculture inputs. I know that matters. Right. In Iowa, a lot of the inputs that our farmers rely on to grow their crops. Yeah. We know they're trying to control our infrastructure, and companies like TP-Link and all these other companies that are tech companies that are owned by the Chinese Communist Party. That's right. How do we combat these types of threats, and what does that look like from the policy standpoint here in Washington to face the Chinese Communist Party?
Yeah, well, so I worked 20 years in counterintelligence, and tragically, we saw the Chinese literally show up in my home state of Iowa, go out to a test field where they scooped out of the ground kernels of corn and put it in their pocket so they could fly back to Beijing and basically break down the genetic makeup to make their own. This is original intellectual property theft. Now, we were able to coordinate with the FBI domestically to stop them on the tarmac, and they didn't succeed that day. But the reality is that China has been a long-time theft actor in stealing intellectual property. In the last year alone, we have seen a series of attacks, both on the president and vice president through Volt Typhoon, but more importantly, on the American people through attacking our 10 largest telecommunications networks. One, to really steal the data from Americans and effectively develop a target package against them. We saw it just happen to the Department of the Treasury earlier this year, and the Biden administration challengingly did too little, too late. Yeah. We need to hold China accountable for its action and call them out publicly for their bad behavior. This is one of the areas that, I served on the National Security Council as Director of Cybersecurity. I think one of the clearest areas we can start holding China accountable in a way that doesn't result in a kinetic confrontation is by saying that you have violated the sovereignty of the United States when you threaten our economy, when you threaten our people, and when you threaten the future of the entire world by this bad behavior. So a couple of things that we are already looking at doing here, both on the China Select Committee and then I serve on the China Commission, which is trying to find on-ramps for the Chinese people to have a better future, but also holding them accountable for just the horrible things they've done to their own population, the Uyghurs, the folks in Hong Kong, but also folks around the world putting kids in cobalt mines to mine lithium for EV batteries. This should be a wake-up call to all Americans here. This is a bad regime who threatens not just the United States, but innocents around the world. With that, I think the legislation that we have proposed is a carrot and stick approach. Really telling China that they can divest from the Communist Chinese Party, much like Congress did with tech company TikTok, so that it can become either a US company or separate from its Chinese partner, ByteDance, and then still have an on-ramp to be successful in markets. Many of my Main Street users love TikTok. I want to see it be successful. What I don't want is that it continues to be a collection element or a propaganda device for the Chinese government. Yeah. Two, I think that we need to be firm with China when it comes to territorial integrity. And that means standing with our key allies in the region. Japan, Singapore, Taiwan, South Korea, and our Austral New Zealand partners. Together, we have a great coalition that can help deter Chinese aggression and candidly, not only protects Taiwan, but prevents China from taking other aggressive approaches in the region for Southeast Asia. And I think ultimately in the United States, we also need to look at China as not only a near peer competitor, but we've got to open up new markets. And that means opportunities with our other friends in Southeast Asia, both India as well as Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, others in the region who have traditionally felt the pressure of China in a diplomat war or wolf warrior sense being suppressed by them. We can offer a hand up, but more importantly, we can offer a market opportunity for soybean farmers in Iowa, as well as car manufacturers in Detroit. This is a truly made in America diplomacy option that grows our economy while helping some of our best allies come on board and combat China across the board.
As we wrap up, one kind of tradition we have here on our video series that we always have we ask our guests to come with a challenge coin that means something to you. And obviously for those watching at home, this is something that service members often receive for doing something great. And I wanted to hear just one that might be special to you. Do you have a challenge coin?
So again, going back to some of my first combat missions, I got a challenge coin from my master sergeant on my first mission. And you all know that there's a good relationship between the lieutenant and the master sergeant. The master sergeant is really there to, one, keep the LT from screwing up, but also serves as a senior enlisted mentor to it. So I was troop commander at the time. And in the Air Force, we have a history. Our unit is a legacy unit that goes all the way back to World War I. It's a recon platform. And the story goes that in World War I, young folks from Iowa were flying a combat sortie to find German artillery, and they got shot down. They made it back to, at that point, was what was a French trench, and the French lieutenant didn't speak Midwestern twang, and the Americans didn't speak any French. And so the French thought that they were saboteurs and lined them up in front of a firing squad. Wow. And so as the young pilot and his recon photographer were about to be shot, the pilot took off his St. Christopher medal and saying the only thing he knew to the French lieutenant was, "Ma mère," give it to my mother. Wow. And so he handed it off in a handshake before he was about to be executed, and the French lieutenant looked at it, and on the back was the aircraft that had been flying recon over those French trenches. Wow. So those French boys didn't get hit by German artillery. And before he ordered to fire, he recognized that this was actually an ally in the skies. And so as a result, the Air Force tradition is you hand off the challenge coin in a handshake, but it means you've got a mentor and a partner on the other side of the trench. So with that, that's our unit's legacy, but more importantly, it also means with every good challenge coin, now that you've got it, you got to buy a drink next time we're at the bar, brother.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, man. Absolutely appreciate it.
Here at Veterans on Duty, we are a policy advocacy organization focused on making sure our military is strong, lethal, and focused. All of that, of course, is about making sure America is safe, strong, and free. Those are the values that we hold dear at Vets on Duty, and that's why we're going to be sitting down with different leaders, veterans, policymakers, even some elected officials in our Beyond the Call video series. Stay tuned and join us.